How's it going, guys? I'm here to talk about the game's newest character, Eros. Long story short, she's a light elemental archer who's found herself at the top of the game's tier list. On her own, she's not uniquely amazing, but instead shines in supporting her team. I'll start with talking through her skills and then transition to what content she's used for. I'm not going to read the entire skill, but I will summarize it. Eros' first skill, Cupid's Mischief, is essentially a strong burst active skill that heals the team over time. If your team is comprised of all archers besides Kayn, then this skill will fully crit with increased penetration as well as its healing effects doubled. Against dark type enemies, this skill will do even more damage, however keep in mind the main importance of this skill is the healing. Also note that all of Eros' following skills that I'll be talking about will also be strengthened based on Eros' level and the number of archers in the team. When the number of archers is 4, the skill's effect is typically doubled. Her second skill, Golden Love Arrow, includes a lot of buffs to herself and the entire team based on the number of archers. Notably, for each archer on the team's crit rate and crit resistance is increased, which makes archer teams very viable for content that requires high crit resistance, such as late game Dark Lord's Tower and Guild Territory. The second effect of this skill provides the team additional damage reduction, which makes all your archers and Kayn a lot more tankier. The last effect to note on this passive skill is that when your team is all archers, then Eros' active skill will actually stun the enemy for 5 seconds. The unique thing about this is that her stun will actually ignore enemy status immunity effects. This stun is especially helpful in the late game when bosses begin to really deal damage, and the 5 seconds of stun will allow your team to heal and recuperate as well as cool down their skills for their next attack. Eros' third skill, Laid Arrow of Hatred, increases her and the team's crit damage and normal monster damage based on her level and the number of archers in the team. The effect is doubled for a full archer team. The second part of this skill increases the archers and Kayn's final damage to enemies by 30%. This skill isn't really all that impressive, but just buffs the team's stats slightly. Eros' fourth skill increases her and the team's HP and defense based on her level and the number of archers in the team. Again, the effect is doubled for an all-archer team. The second part of this skill, which is very important, is the elemental damage reduction provided to the team against light and dark attribute enemies in Raid and World Boss. In a way, Eros can be a good substitute for Ymir and Joan in Raid, since she can provide the same elemental damage reductions. This will ultimately lead to Ymir and Joan dropping down in the tier list as they're used less frequently in Raid now. Eros' last skill increases her and the team's active skill damage and boss damage based on her level and the number of archers in the team. Like her other passives before, this skill stacks and the effects are doubled if you're using an all-archer team. This entire passive is pretty much just a boost to damage. Now that we have gone over her skills, let's briefly talk about what she's good at. If you haven't noticed already, her skills are the strongest in an all-archer team, and that's where I would typically see her used most often, whether that be in Adventure, Raid, Guild Territory, or Dark Lord's Tower. When she's involved in an all-archer team, not only are her heals the strongest, but the team's damage and tankiness will also be at its highest due to the enhancements in offensive buffs and damage reduction. Common archers you would use with Eros include Gaia, Kana, Cheiron, and Artemis. For most situations, Gaia and Kana are going to be preferable, with the last archer being either Cheiron or Artemis. You can't go wrong with either water archer, but for a lot of late game situations, Cheiron does more damage and also provides additional crit resistance to the team, so therefore her kit is more helpful to the team than Artemis. Mary is the other 5-star archer, but being that she doesn't provide nearly any useful team buffs, she's not even in this conversation. Now, is Eros still a viable character without an all-archer team? Definitely, but the same cannot be said for all the other archers. All the other archers I would only consider to be top tier as long as they're in a party with Eros. Otherwise, they're fairly mid to low tier. Eros can often be utilized in water teams such as those that involve Vivian, Ariel, and Irie. She can be placed within most other teams as well, though the limiting factor would mostly be what type of boss and immunities you'll be facing. For the most part, you'll mostly be using her in areas like Dark Lord's Tower, Guild Territory, and Raid. Like I said before, in all archer teams, she helps ensure that the team has strong heals, damage, and damage reduction. The fact that her active skill also stuns in an all archer team, even against bosses with status immunity, is very helpful, especially in Dark Lord's Tower and Guild Territory where you need to be able to do a lot of damage in a short amount of time without dying. Because of her passive that reduces elemental damage from dark and light enemies in raid and world boss, she's often used in raid where you'll encounter those types of elemental bosses a couple times per week. There's also raid bosses who are weak against archers, and that is yet another day where an all archer team would prove useful. I'm just gonna flat out say it, the full archer team is currently dominating the meta alongside the all water teams. I would rank the all warrior and all mage teams of the past to be slightly worse when compared to all archer and water teams. I can't say that the all archer team definitively beats the all water team because there are bosses where water will be preferable. So my recommendation is to invest heavily in both the archer and water teams, at least during the time of this video's release. The only areas where she is not the best would be game modes like PvP and slasher mode, where there are other characters with better skills suited for those game modes. But otherwise, Eros is phenomenally useful everywhere else regardless of whether she's in an all archer team or not. Because the late to endgame has a much heavier focus on raid and guild territory, someone like Eros, who is very common in those teams, is going to be held to a higher standard on my tier list, which I'll be releasing soon, so stay tuned for that as well, as there'll be quite a few changes. One last thing I forgot to mention real quick was gear. For her weapon, you'd want to maximize her attack, so weapons such as the crossbow or Excalibur refined with maximum attack percent would be ideal. As for her gear, if she's not getting hit by the boss, I would recommend 3 Ares and 2 Achilles to maximize her attack. Otherwise, if she does not get hit by the boss, then you will want some combination of gear that at least gives her some attack percentage and at least 10% damage reduction. If she's the squishiest person on your team, then you may want to give her your tankiest gear sets like your Guardian set to help her and your team survive longer. That's all I have today in regards to Eros. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll be releasing an updated tier list and perhaps some more videos including Eros real soon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.